everybody, and welcome to the Penelope Possum channel with me, your hostess, Penelope the Possum. You know what? I was gonna do a creepypasta, but I'm not sure I want to do that. I think I want to do some Dr. Bob videos. I've seen some new ones recently. Hold on. No. We'll do the story. So stories. Yes, story time. For once, I don't have to be quiet while reading. Hello! I got some spider string lights. They're very silly. They don't like to stay on my area where I put them though. Anyway, this is you know what? Let's find. Oh no. Oh well. You can always watch later. Yeah, cool. But you can always catch the edited version later. I don't feel like reading a popular creepypasta. I feel like Abandoned by Disney is a good choice. So this is Abandoned by Disney by Slime Beast. I feel like this is a repost of the original one because I remember reading or hearing it read in the early 2000s. So some of you may have heard that the Disney Corporation is responsible for at least one real, live ghost town. Disney built the Treasure Island in one more time. Disney built the Treasure Island Resort in Baker's Bay in the Bahamas. Excuse me. It didn't start as a ghost town. Disney's cruise ships would actually stop at the resort and leave tourists there to relax in luxury. This is a fact. Look it up. Disney blew $30 million on the place. Yes, $30 million. And they abandoned it. Disney blamed the shallow waters too shallow for the ships to safely operate. There was even blame cast on the workers, saying that since they were from the Bahamas, they were too lazy to work a regular schedule. That's where the factual nature of this story ends. It wasn't because of sand, and it obviously wasn't because foreigners are lazy. Both are convenient excuses. No, I sincerely doubt both. One more time. No, I sincerely doubt those reasons were legitimate. Why I don't buy the official story? Because of Mowgli's palace. Near the beachside city of Emerald Isle in North Carolina, Disney began construction of Mowgli's palace in the late 1990s. The concept was a jungle-themed resort with a large, you guessed it, palace in the center of the whole thing. If you're unfamiliar with the character of Mowgli, then you might better remember the story The Jungle Book. If you haven't seen it anywhere else, you'll know it's a Disney cartoon from decades past. Hello! Just cleaning my glasses. Sighting's important for reading. Mowgli is an abandoned child in the jungle, essentially raised by animals and simultaneously threatened/pursued by other animals. Mowgli's palace is a controversial undertaking from the start. Disney bought up a ton of high-priced land for the project. It is? Yes. And there was actually a scandal surrounding some of the purchases. The local government claimed eminent domain on people's homes, then turned around and sold the properties to Disney. Yes, can I help you? Very, very dumb. Oh my goodness, you are so not helpful. You are so unhelpful. At one point, the home that had just been constructed was immediately condemned with little to no explanation. Why are my glasses still dirty? The land grabbed by the government was supposedly for some fictional highway project. Knowing full well what was going on, people started calling it the Mickey Mouse Highway. Then there was the concept art. A group of stuffed shirts from Disney Co. actually held a city meeting. They intended to sell everyone on how lucrative this project was going to be for everyone. Then they showed the concept art, this gigantic Indian palace surrounded by jungle, staffed with men and women in loincloths and tribal gear. Well, suffice to say, everyone flipped their shit. We're talking about a large Indian palace, jungle, and loincloths, not only in the center of a relatively wealthy area, but also somewhat xenophobic area of the southern USA. It was a questionable mix of that at that point in history. One member of the crowd tried to storm the stage. He was quickly subdued by security after he managed to break one of the presentation boards over his knee. You mean Disney? I'm stupid. Disney took that community and essentially broke it over its knee as well. Houses were razed, the land was cleared. There wasn't a damned thing anyone could do or say about it. Local TV and newspapers were against the result at the beginning, but some insane connection between Disney's media holdings and the local venues came into play, and their opinions turned on a dime. So anyway, Treasure Island, the Bahamas. Disney sunk those millions in and then split. Same thing happened with Mowgli's Palace. Construction was complete. Visitors actually stayed at the resort. The surrounding communities were flooded with traffic and the usual annoyances associated with an influx of lost and irate tourists. Then it just stopped. Disney shut it down and nobody knew what the hell to think. But they were pretty happy about it. Disney's loss was pretty hilarious and wonderful to a large group of folks that didn't want this in the first place. I honestly didn't give the place another thought since hearing it closed over a decade ago. I maybe 4 hours from Emerald Isle, so I only heard rumblings and didn't experience any of it firsthand. Then I read this article from someone who had explored the Treasure Island resort and posted a whole blog about all the crazy shit he found there. Stuff just left behind, things smashed, defaced, probably ruined by the disgruntled former employees who lost their jobs. Hell, the locals from all around probably had a hand in wrecking that place. People felt just as angry about Treasure Island as folks did about Mowgli's Palace. Plus, there were rumors that Disney had released their aquarium stock into the local waters when they closed, including sharks. Who wouldn't want to take a few swings at some merchandise after that? Well, what I'm getting at is that this blog about Treasure Island got me thinking. Even though many years had passed since its closing, I figured it might be cool to do some urban exploration at Mowgli's Palace. Don't do it. It's a bad idea. Trust me, buddy. You're gonna regret this as soon as you do it. Oh, good news. I finished making my sweater. So, sweater's finished. One more project done. Many, many thousands of more to do. Who knows? Take some photos, write about my experience, and probably see if there was anything I could take home as a memento. I'm not going to say I wasted no time in getting there, because honestly, it took me another year after I first found that Treasure Island article to get around to going up to Emerald Isle. Over the course of that year, I did a lot of research on the Palace Resort, or rather, I tried to. Naturally, no official Disney site or resource made any mention of the place that had been scrubbed clean. Even odder, however, was that nobody before myself... Thank you. Had apparently thought to blog about the place or even post a photo. None of the local TV or newspaper sites had one word about the place. Though that was to be expected since they all swung Disney's way. They wouldn't be out there lauding their embarrassment, you know? Recently I learned that corporations can actually ask Google, for example, to remove links from search results, basically for no good reason. Looking back, it's probably not that nobody spoke of the resort, Rather, their words were made inaccessible. So in the end, I could barely find the place. All I had to go on was an old-as-hell map I had received in the mail back in the 90s. It was a promotional item sent out to people who had recently been to Disney World. I guess since I'd been in there in the late 80s, that was recent. I didn't really intend to hold on to it. It just got shoved with my books and comics from my childhood. I only remembered it months into my research. And even then, it took me another few weeks to locate the storage bin my parents had shoved it all into. I was in awe when I reached the front gates of the resort. Tremendous, monolithic, wooden gates whose supports to either side looked like they must have been cut from giant sequoias. The gate itself had been gouged in several places by woodpeckers and eaten away at the base by burrowing insects. Hanging on the gate was a sheet of metal, some random scrap, with hand-painted letters scrawled in black. Abandoned by Disney. Clearly the handiwork of some past local or an employee who wanted to make some small protest. The gates were opened enough to walk through, but not to drive. So grabbing my digital camera and the map, whose flip side showed a layout of the resort, I set off on foot. The inner grounds of the place were just as overgrown as the entryway. Palm trees stood untended and ragged among piles of their own coconuts. Banana plants similarly stood in their own stinking bud-riddled refuse. There was this sort of clash between order and chaos. As carefully planted rows of perennial flowers mixed with noxious tall weeds and stinking blackened mushrooms. All that remained of any outdoor structures were broken, rotting wood and various charred bits of unidentifiable material. What was most likely an information booth or an outdoor let me reread that. What was most likely an information booth or an outdoor bar was simply now a pile of assorted debris, chopped up by past vandalism and ravaged by weather. The most interesting thing on the grounds was a statue of Baloo, a friendly bear from the Jungle Book, which stood in a sort of courtyard in front of the main building. It was frozen in a jovial way toward no one, staring into empty space with a silly, toothy grin as bullshit covered whole swaths of his fur and vines and snared his platform. I approached the main building, the palace. Not now a vast. I'm turning off the lights. They're not doing anything really. Only to find the outside of the building covered in graffiti where the original paint hadn't peeled and chipped away. The front doors weren't just open. They'd been taken off their hinges and were stolen. Above the doors or the gaping maw once they had been, someone had once again painted "Abandoned by Disney." I wish I could tell you about all the awesome stuff I saw inside the palace. Forgotten statues, abandoned cash registers full of a full-fledged secret society of homeless bums. But no. Inside of the building was so stark, so bare. I think people had actually stolen the molding off the walls. Anything that was too big to steal. Counters, desks, giant fake trees. They were all resting amid this empty echo chamber that amplified my every step like a slow rat-a-tat of a machine gun. I had checked the floor plan and headed to all the locations that might seem in any way interesting. The kitchen, as you would imagine, an industrial food prep area, with all the appliances and space, no expenses spared. Every glass surface was broken, every door knocked off its hinges, every metal surface kicked and dented. The entire place smelled like very old piss. The huge freezer, not even remotely cool now, had row upon row of empty shelf space, hooks hung from the ceiling, probably for hanging cuts of meat. As I stood inside for a moment, I noticed they were swinging. Each hook swung in random directions, but their movements were so slow and small it was almost impossible to see. I figured it had been caused by my footsteps, so I stopped one from swinging by clutching it with my fist, and carefully letting it go, but within seconds it started to swing once more. The bathrooms were in much the same state as the rest of the place. Just like the Treasure Island resort, someone had methodically smashed each porcelain commode with coconuts and other implements. There was about a half-inch of rancid, stinking, stagnant water on the floor, so I didn't stay there very long. What's odd is that the toilets and sinks and bidets in the ladies' room, yes, I went there, all dripped or leaked or ran freely. It seemed to me that they should have shut the water off long ago. Long ago. There were plenty of rooms in the resort, but naturally I didn't have time to look through them all. A few I did peer into were similarly wrecked, and I didn't expect to find anything there. I thought there was actually a television or radio in one room, as I actually think I heard a quiet conversation coming out. It was a whisper, probably breathing echoing on the silence, or just another case of the sound of flowing water playing tricks on the mind. This is what it sounded like. I didn't believe it. Short, unknown reply. I didn't know that. I didn't know that. Your father told you. Unknown reply, or possibly just weeping. I know. It sounds ridiculous. I'm just telling you what I experienced. Why I thought there might have been something running in that room, or worse, some vagrants who had holed up in there and probably knifed me. At the front doors of the palace again, I figured I hadn't found anything of note and wasted the trip up. As I looked out the door, I noticed something interesting in the courtyard that I had apparently missed. Something that would at least give me one thing to show for all my trouble, even if it was just a photograph. There was a lifelike One more time. There was a lifelike statue of a python, maybe 80 feet long, coiled up and sunning itself on a pedestal right in the center of the area. It was almost time for the sun to start setting, so the light fell onto the object in the perfect way for a photograph. I approached the python and snapped a photo. Then I stood on my toes and snapped another. I moved closer again to get the detail of its face. Slowly, casually, the python lifted its head, looked me directly in my eyes, turned and slithered off the pedestal, across the grass and into the trees. All 80 feet of it. Its head long disappeared into the woods before its tail even left the sunning spot. Disney had released all their exotic animals onto the grounds. Right there on my floor plan map was Reptile House. I should have known. I read about the sharks at Treasure Isle, and I should have known they'd done this. I was dumbfounded, just utterly stupefied. My mouth must have been hanging open for the longest time before I came back down to earth and snapped it shut. I blinked a few times and backed away from where the snake had been, back toward the palace. Even though it was totally gone, I wasn't taking any chances and backed away into the building. I took a few deep breaths and slaps to my own face to get myself right in the head again after that. I looked for a place to sit down, as my legs were feeling a bit like jelly at this point. Of course, there was no place to sit down unless I wanted to recline in the broken glass and dead leaf carpet or haul myself up onto a desk of questionable reliability.
Is he stinky?
He is.
Is he the big stinkums?
He is the biggest stinky.
Ow.
He also has bunny pants on.
He always has bunny pants on. I had seen some stairs at the palace's lobby that I decided to go have a seat there until I felt better. The staircase was far enough away from the front of the building to be relatively clean, save for the startling accumulation of dust. I pulled a wedge of metal off the wall, once again painted with the "Abandoned by Disney" motto I'd become accustomed to. I placed the wedge on the stairs and sat on it, at least to keep somewhat clean. Stairway led downward, below ground level. Using my camera flash as sort of an improvised flashlight, I could see that the staircase ended in a metal mesh door with a padlock. Sign on the door, a real sign, read, "Mascots only, thank you." This perked up my spirits a little bit, for 2 reasons. 1, a mascots only area would definitely have some interesting stuff back in the day. 2, the padlock was still in place. Nobody had gone down there. Not the vandals, not the looters, nobody. This was the one place I could actually explore and perhaps find something interesting to photograph or wantonly steal. I'd come to the palace essentially agreeing with myself that it was okay to take anything I wanted, 'cause, hey, abandoned. Oh, hush.
Hush. Hush, baby boy. I know you are so sad. You are so sad. You are so sad.
Didn't take much to bust the lock. Well, actually, that's wrong. Didn't take much to bust the metal plate on the wall that the padlock was to. Time and decay had done most of the work for me. I was able to bend the middle plate enough to pull the screws out of the wall, something nobody else had apparently thought of, or hadn't been able to do at the time. The mascot's only area was a startling and very welcome change from the rest of the building I had seen. For one, every second or third fluorescent light was illuminated, even though they flickered and faded randomly. Also, nothing had been stolen or broken, even if age and exposure were definitely taking their toll. Tables had notepads and pens. There were clocks, even a punching clock on the wall complete with filled-out time cards. Chairs were scattered around, and there was even a small break room in the old. One more time, chairs were scattered around, and there was even a small break room with an old static-filled television and long rotted out food and drink were on the counters. It was like one of those post-apocalypse movies where everything is left in a state of evacuation. As I walked the maze-like sub-basement hallways of the mascot-only area, sights just became more and more interesting. As I went further, desks and tables were knocked over, papers scattered, almost melded with the damp floor. A large carpet of mold was slowly overtaking the real, rotting crimson floor covering. Everything was just sort of squishy. Anything wood disintegrated into mush when I applied even the least amount of force. And clothing items hanging on hooks. One of the rooms simply filled with moist threads if I tried to unhook them. One thing that annoyed me was that the light was becoming more and more sparse and unreliable as I went further into the dank, suffocating depths of this place. Eventually, I reached a black and yellow striped door with the words Character Prep 1 stenciled on it. The door wouldn't open at first. I figured this is probably where the costumes were kept. I definitely wanted a photograph of the twisted, stinking mess. Try as I might, whatever angle or trick I tried, the door wouldn't budge. That is, until I gave up and started to walk away. Then that was when there was a slight popping sound and the door creaked open slowly. Inside the room was completely dark, pitch black. I used the camera flash to look for a light switch in the wall by the door, but there was nothing. As I made my search, I was drawn out of my sense of excitement by a large electrical buzz. Rows of lights overhead suddenly flashed to life, flickering and fading in and out, just like the rest I had passed. It took a second for my eyes to adjust, and it seemed like the light was going to just keep getting brighter until the bulbs exploded. But just when I thought it would reach that critical stage, the lights dimmed a bit and steadied. The room was exactly as I had pictured it. Various Disney costumes hung on the walls, fully put together like strange cartoon cadavers hung from invisible nooses. There was an entire lack of loincloths and native clothes on hangers at the back. What I found odd, and what I wanted to photograph right away, was a Mickey Mouse costume at the center of the room. Unlike the other costumes, it was lying on its back in the center of the floor like a murder victim. The fur on the costume was rotten and shedding, creating bare patches. What was even odder, however, was the coloring of the costume. It was like a photo negative of the actual Mickey Mouse. Black where he should have been white, white where she should have been black. As normally red overalls were white blue. So it was off-putting enough that I actually put off photographing the thing until last. I took pictures of costumes hanging on the walls, upward angles, downward angles, side shots, showing an entire row of frozen putrid cartoon faces, some with plastic eyes missing. This side, the stage is shot. Just one of the bedraggled character heads on the slick, grimy floor. Reached for the headpiece of a Donald Duck costume and carefully removed it so the thing wouldn't fall apart in my hands. As I looked into the face of the wide-eyed, mouldering head, a loud clattering sound made me jump with affright. I looked down at my feet, and there between my shoes was a human skull. It had fallen out of the mascot head and shattered into the pieces at my feet. Only the empty face and lower jaw remained staring up at me. I dropped on the duck head immediately, as you'd expect, moved for the door. As I stood in the doorway, I looked back at the skull on the floor. I had to take up a picture of it, you know. I had to, for any number of reasons that may seem silly, but only if you didn't think it through. I'd need proof of what happened, especially if Disney was somehow going to make this go away. I had no doubt in my mind right from the start that even this was just gross negligence. Disney was responsible for this, and that's when Mickey, that photo negative opposite Mickey in the middle of the floor, started to get up. Having fun over there, bud?
Huh?
Having fun?
Yeah.
First sitting up, then climbing to its feet, the Mickey Mouse costume, or whoever was inside of it, stood there at the center of the room, its fake face staring directly as I mumbled no over and over and over. With shaking hands and a violently thrashing heart, and legs that had once again turned to jelly, I managed to lift the camera and aim it at the opposite creature now quietly sizing me up. The digital camera's screen displayed only dead pixels in the shape of the thing. It was the perfect silhouette of the Mickey costume. As the camera moved into my unsteady hand, the dead pixels spread, marring the screen wherever Mickey's outline had moved to. Then the camera died, went black, quiet and broken. I raised my eyes to the Mickey costume once again. "Hey," it said in a hushed, perverted, but perfectly executed Mickey Mouse voice. "Wanna see my head come off?" It started to pull at its own head, working its clumsy, glove-clad fingers around its neck with a clawing, impatient movement similar to a wounded man trying to pull himself free of the predator's jaws. As it worked its digits into its neck, so much blood, so much thick, chunky yellow blood. Yeah, I probably would have split the second I saw the costumes being all gross. But hey, some people are just really special. It shouldn't have gone this far. It shouldn't have gone this far, and it wouldn't have gotten this far if this guy wasn't a freaking moron. But if the main protagonist of the horror story isn't a moron, then there is no horror story. I turned away as I heard a sickening tearing of cloth and flesh. I only cared about getting away. Above the doorway out of this room, I saw the final message clawed into the metal with bone or fingernails. Abandoned by God. I never got the pictures out of my camera. I never wrote the blog entry about it. After I ran from that place, I fled for my sanity, if not my very life. I know why Disney didn't want anybody to know about this place. They didn't want anyone like me getting in, and they didn't want anything like that getting out. And that was Abandoned by Disney. We have enough time for one more. Then we'll probably skedaddle and be done with the spooky scary Saturday for this week. This is The Black Bone Tree, written by Elias Withrow, edited by Sean Paul and Craig Groshek. Thumbnail art is by Craig Groshek. There are currently no available audio adaptations, and the estimated reading time is 22 minutes. The rating is 9.60 out of 10 from 10 votes, and it was published on May 7th, 2021. I heard an owl. Owl? Owl? There's an owl outside. 2 days ago, I drove up to northern Vermont to do a little hiking. I needed to get away from it all. My job, my social responsibilities, the world. I didn't want to have to talk to anyone all weekend. So I picked a 10-mile trail I didn't think anyone would be on this time of year. The plan was to hike up and across the mountaintops, stay at the summit for a day, and then hike back down. I gotta go get something for my throat. I'll be right back. Got a sore throat. Here's the owl again. As I drove the 4 hours to the trail's start, I felt all my stress begin to fade. I realized how long it had been since I had taken time out of my busy life for me time. The thought of the woods and the beautiful New England mountains kept my mind buzzing as I zipped through the small towns and empty roads. This was my first mini vacation since I graduated and started my new job 2 years ago. It was long overdue, and I looked forward to the time I could spend reflecting and enjoying my thoughts in nature. After what seemed like no time at all, I was pulling into the small, empty dirt parking area and pulling my backpack on. After making sure the car was locked, I tightened my straps and began what was sure to be a wonderful hike. I just realized I started slipping back into the voice I had used for the last video, so I'll try to stop doing that. I had been walking for a good 3 hours. The sun now high over my head, I had checked my watch and saw that it was noon. I walked a little further until I found a suitable rock for sitting and dropped my pack next to it. I unzipped it and pulled out one of the sandwiches I had prepared, taking a seat. As I munched on my ham and cheese delicacy, I took in the beauty around me. In the distance, I could make out the sound of a stream gurgling down the mountainside, bringing the earth to life. Taking another bite of my sandwich, I pulled out my map and tracked where I was. I was correct. I was about 2.5 miles in, a quarter of the way to my destination. In another 3 miles, I would break through the tree line and go the last 4.5 miles across the tops of the Green Mountains. Finishing my meal, I slipped down a few mouthfuls of water and shouldered my pack. I told myself I wasn't going to stop again until I broke through the tree line. Determined and enjoying myself, I pressed on. As I walked, I realized I had yet to see anybody else. I wasn't all that surprised, considering the dirt patch where I'd parked had been empty. I knew this wasn't a popular hiking area, most of the hot spots being one state over or further south. I like to think I was alone out here, the only human for hundreds of miles. It made me feel like these were my woods, and I was blazing the trail myself. I began to get lost in my thoughts. My feet taking me down the trail and my mind expanding into the woods around me. I don't know how long I had been walking when I suddenly stopped. Something catching my eye to the right of the trail. It was a circular clearing, just a few steps off the path. In the center of the empty space was something I had never seen before, and it grabbed my attention. It was a black, leafless tree. It stood alone in the little circular clearing, the earth around it bare and dry. It wasn't a big tree, barely reaching my chin. Its naked ebony branches twisting out from the base like long, broken fingers. At first, I thought it was the remains of a small fire. But as I got closer, I saw that wasn't the case. The dark wood looked healthy, the bark smooth and uncharred. Despite its unaltered state, I noticed tiny plumes of smoke drifting off its branches. As I took another step closer, sniffing the air, but didn't smell burning. One more step and I was inside the circular clearing, ground void of any foliage or rocks. As soon as I crossed that threshold, I noticed the dramatic drop in temperature. I shivered and wrapped my arms around myself, bewildered. What the hell? I thought, wondering why I had gone from a pleasant 75 degrees to near freezing. I could see my breath billowing out in front of me, and I retreated from the clearing. Immediately, the temperature went back up. I stood there, staring at the inky black tree, dumbfounded. I have never seen or experienced anything like it. This had to be some kind of rarity, a true gem of nature. I wondered if it was cold to the touch, the wood matching the icy air that encircled it. I stepped into the small clearing again, this time ready for the change in temperature. I approached the tree, hand outstretched, and reached for one of the branches. My fingers enclosed around the wood. One more time. My fingers enclosed around the wood, and my world went dark. I was in an empty field. Nothing but cows as far as I could see. I was standing amidst them, their eyes black and lifeless. They turned and looked at me, completely silent. My heart was racing. I had tried to shift around them, but there were too many. They pressed in tight, and I raised my hands above my head, terrified they would bite my fingers. What the hell was going on, I thought, panic seizing me. Where am I? In the distance, I heard the sound of a bell tolling endlessly. Then a voice whispered to me from somewhere in the herd close by, "Sinner, sinner." I spun around, trying to determine where the voice was coming from, eyes prying into the bovine nightmare. "Who's there? Hello?" I cried, wincing as the cows came closer, sniffing me, rubbing against my body. No answer. Everything was so quiet, too quiet for the amount of livestock around me, except for the bell that continued to toll, its deep chimes rippling through the still air. Suddenly, I spotted something on the horizon. It was a dark smudge that was growing bigger and bigger at an alarming rate. I squinted and realized it was an enormous black tree rocketing from the ground. Its roots shot towards me, tearing through the herd of cattle and decimating any that were in its path. Blood and gore exploded into the air as chunks of animals were shredded and pushed out of the way. Nothing made a sound, except for the endless distant bell. I stumbled backwards, screaming, watching as the tree continued to grow, now hundreds of feet high. Its leafless branches were arching into a sunless sky. The path of death its roots were carving into the cows had almost reached me. I turned and ran, still screaming, desperately pushing the herd out of my way. I looked over my shoulder and saw I wasn't going fast enough. The sweat stood out on my forehead and adrenaline dumped into my system, my throat raw from screaming. As the bloody roots were about to reach me, everything shifted. I was standing in a forest. There was no undergrowth, just towering trees so thick, with leaves that they blackened. One more time. There was no undergrowth, just towering trees so thick with leaves they blacked out the sun. The earth was dry beneath my feet, and the sound of the bell had stopped. Everything was still. No, something was wrong with the trees. My mouth fell open as my eyes soaked up this new horror. They were people, twisted and massive beyond anything I could imagine. Their skin was fused with bark that grew like a cancer, covering their nakedness. Branches protruded from their body, leaving gaping, bloody knots in the flesh. They had no feet, just contorted shins that sprouted from the ground, roots coiling around them like unmoving snakes. Their eyes stared down at me, empty of emotion, watching me. Their mouths were sealed shut, knotted closed with twisted bark. Then I heard the bell again, but it was different. The sound was smaller, like that of a handbell you would ring to summon someone. The sound echoed through the woods. The tree people's eyes grew wide and one more time. The tree people's eyes grew wide and a wind rustled through their leaves. They were terrified. I fell to the earth, covering my ears, screaming. And everything shifted again. Darkness surrounded me. I didn't know where I was, but someone was grabbing me, pulling at my shirt. I slapped the hands away, engulfed in total blackness, stumbling back over my own feet. I couldn't see anything, not even my own hands in front of my face. Tell them I'm sorry. A voice cried out in front of me. Tell them I didn't mean to. I stretched my hands out, trying to get my bearings. My breath was coming in short pulls and my mouth was going dry. What is this nightmare? What's happening to me? The voice called out to me again. He was scared and weeping. Just tell them to leave me alone. I won't do it again, I promise. I crouched down and tried to feel the ground, but there was nothing. It was like I'm floating in space, feet planted on an invisible platform with no density. I focused on the voice, clearing my throat and trying not to sound as terrified as I was. Where are we? Who are you? They'll find me. I know they will. He wept, ignoring my questions. I tried a different angle. Who will find you? I heard him inhale sharply. Then the blue-eyed axeman. Who are they? Why are they coming from you? One more time. Why are they coming for you? He continued to cry hopelessly, his voice coming from just a few feet in front of me. I could hear him shifting, balling himself up. I continued to try and question him, but it was no use. He didn't say anything else. He just kept sobbing and babbling nonsense I couldn't quite make out. I tried to reach out to my surroundings again, hoping my hands would find something, anything. I was beginning to feel claustrophobic. A thick darkness filling the space around me, filling my eye, my mouth and throat. I tried to calm myself, fighting off a massive panic attack. Suddenly the crying stopped. Faintly I heard the chime of a small bell. A whisper. No. I whipped my head around, widening my eyes, pleading to see through the black. It was silent, except for my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. I saw 2 pairs of eyes open in the darkness. They were large, the size of baseball, the deepest blue I had ever seen. They did not blink, just hovered by where the man's voice had been coming from. Before I could react, I heard a deep gurgling sound come from whatever possessed the 2 sets of eyes. It was a sickly sound, like someone trying to clear a throat that was filled with mucus and phlegm. Made me nauseous and I covered my ears, trying not to gag as a wave of bile churned in my stomach. I'm sorry, I heard the man scream. Forgive me. His voice rose in pitch and terror, cracked his shrieks before something thudded into him, bringing with it a meaty squelch. This isn't happening to me, I thought. Madness encroaching my mind. Everything shifted. I sat up in a bed, pushing covers off me. I was in a small cabin decorated with rustic furniture and old carpets. From the windows, the light of a full moon trickled in, and the sounds of night echoed outside the cabin walls. How long have I been out? I thought. With a sudden jerk, I realized there was an older man one more time. I realized there was an older man sitting at the foot of the bed, looking at me. His hair was graying, and wrinkles fanned out from the corners of his tired blue eyes. "Who are you?" I sputtered, trying to get a grip on myself. "Easy, easy," he said, raising his hands. "Just take a breath, son. I found you in the woods, unconscious, on my way home. This is my home. You're safe." I digested this, trying to clear my mind. This felt real. Nightmare visions draining from my swimming head like a poisonous venom. I took a few unsteady breaths and propped myself up in an upright position against the head of the bed frame. "Is this real?" I asked. "Is this Vermont?" He nodded. "Yes, of course it is. What happened to you? Were you attacked?" "What? No," I said, shaking my head. I just found this tree." I trailed off, noticing a series of shallow cuts and scrapes on my arms. "What happened to me?" I said, twisting my arms. The man shifted on the bed. "I don't know. I found you not far from here, just lying on the ground off the trail. Judging from those cuts, it looks like you were running from something. A bear, maybe? You remember?" I pinched the bridge of my nose and squeezed my eyes to purge them of the images I had seen. No, nothing like that. I don't remember running from anything. I was just taking a hike and saw this weird black tree. I think I touched it. And then everything began to change. The man stood up suddenly, backing away from the bed. You touched the black tree? Are you sure?" The urgency in his voice caught me off guard. "Well, yeah, it was in this little clearing. The air around it was so cold. I'd never seen anything like it." He stood in the corner of the cabin, staring me down with worried eyes. "And you touched it?" I nodded. He sat down hard on a chair next to an ashy fireplace. No, oh no, what have you done?" "What are you talking about?" I asked. "We don't touch the black trees," the old man hissed, taking a step back from me. "What are they? Where did they come from?" I asked, the urgency in his voice stirring up my own unease. He licked his lips and checked the windows, glancing out into the moonlit night. "I can't believe there's one here. What are the odds? I should have known something like this would happen." "Can you slow down and tell me what's going on?" I yelled, suddenly feeling very irritated. The way he seemed to be deliberately avoiding my questions was pissing me off, especially what I had just been through. The man turned to glare at me, his eyes blue chips of ice. "Don't talk to me like that after I cared for you. Do you understand?" "Yeah, I understand. Something really strange has happened to me. If you know something about it, I'd appreciate it if you clued me in." He stood there for a moment, slowly dragged a kitchen chair over to my bed, sitting down and pulling out a small pipe. He stuffed it with tobacco from his shirt pocket and flicked a match out the bottom of the chair. He took a quick few puffs from the pipe and returned his gaze to me. Okay, I'll answer your questions if you answer mine. Deal? Deal. Sweet-smelling smoke billowed from his lips as he spoke. One more time. Sweet-smelling smoke billowed from his lips as he spoke. This black tree, where did you find it? How big was it? It wasn't very large, maybe 4 feet high. There were no leaves, just burnt-looking branches and what looked like smoke rising off the wood. It was down the path. I'm not sure where we are now, but it can't be far from here. He waved away tendrils of smoke from his face. And you thought it'd be a good idea to touch it? And I shook my head. It wasn't like that. It was in a small clearing. I had never seen anything like it. And it was cold. As soon as I got close, the temperature dropped. I guess I just wanted to see. Well, I trailed off, looking down. What happened then? I swallowed, unsure if I wanted to share my visions with him. I looked up at him, and he slowly nodded, my eyes giving away the caution and unease of the memory. He leaned forward, pulling the pipe from his lips. You saw some things, didn't you? I returned to stare. Yeah, I really don't know how to explain it. It was awful. The man leaned back, the tip of his pipe slipping between his lips again. Damn, well, son, I'm afraid you stumbled upon a black bone tree. What the hell is a black bone tree? I asked, suddenly feeling pain in my right arm. I massaged it, feeling like the muscles were cramping. The man took notice, but didn't comment. Son, there's a lot of things you don't know about the world. There's a lot of things people aren't supposed to know. It's better that way. Keeps us safe. Keeps us happy. If we knew about all the evil out there, why, I believe we might all go insane. But seeing how you've already reached out and touched that evil, I'm going to tell you some things. Important things that you need to understand. The ever-evolving accent of this man is hilarious to me. Oh, man. Okay, so we'll finish this later. That was a very long story. Holy cannolis. Okay, so that was a very, very long story. We'll finish it next Spooky Scary Saturday. Or maybe Tuesday. I don't know. We'll see how we feel. But, till next time. Stay out of car engine compartments. Stay out of traffic. Stay hydrated. Stay lovely, everybody. This has been your local possum. Keep it awesome, guys. And I'll see you guys next time. Thank you very much for hanging out. I gotta go play possum for a little while. But I'll catch you guys on the flip-flop next Tuesday. Be great to each other. I love you all. And as always, don't trust Disney, yes. But for real now, I love you all. Be good to each other. Goodbye.